So here's a question for Kelly. I've only seen a limited amount of Markdown, but what I saw of it was, frankly, for me, underwhelming. That it seemed far too primitive a system for generating complex technical documents of the type that I personally need to deal with. So Kelly, since you're working in an environment where you probably have a lot of important structure as well, has Markdown limited what you can do? And do you have to do end runs around it, or is it really quite adequate for your needs?
The benefit of using Markdown is that my colleagues that don't know LaTeX are less intimidated by Markdown. So then I get more collaborators. But with that, I have a lot of behind the scenes code that they never see or interact with that helps increase the capacity of Markdown. So in short, no, it's not really sufficient, but you can add supporting networks to it to make it as sufficient as I need.
Another question is, with a language like LaTeX, you are compiling it, and so there's a parse that's done in the input, and you can get error messages back. Do Markdown translators do a reasonable job of detecting erroneous markup? And secondly, for people who are visually impaired, the limited amount of Markdown I've seen suggests that it uses layout for structure, as opposed to commands to indicate this is the start of a chapter or section and so on. So would a visually impaired or blind person be able to read a Markdown file and understand its structure?
To answer the first question regarding the output that you get when you compile a Markdown document, a lot of it is cryptic to me, but so is LaTeX. So the level of cryptic, or the level that Markdown provides is similar to LaTeX in my mind. So I've been able to track most error messages and figure out what's going on in both of them. So I think they're equally good. And then with regard to your second question about structure, the main structure involves the pound or the hashtag symbol as far as creating headings. But the thing is Markdown's always translated to a text file. And so if you, in my case, and so both files are available. But it puts headers in there. I'm not really sure, like behind the scenes, if there's more information that's needed, because I just don't know LaTeX good enough to know the like tree structure that's behind it. But I know that it is good enough with Pandoc to create a subsequent tree structure which can be tagged in a logical order using the Lua LaTeX filters, I think. Sorry if I'm saying the name wrong.
Good. Thanks for those comments. And thanks also for mentioning Pandoc, which is an interesting tool developed on the west coast of the US to try to bring documents into a common format that can be then translated to any other format.
And Pandoc's really all that we use because it's bundled within inside R tools, which is distributed with R. And so we use our Markdown documents that we can render our code to create output, as well as having a reproducible document. So Pandoc is really convenient for scientists because it's bundled and distributed with the software that we use to make the graphics or do the analysis.
Good. Thanks again.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm glad you mentioned the R community, because it seems from my outside experience that Markdown and LaTeX are key components of what they do, that they all do things much the same way, using Markdown as input and LaTeX for PDF output. A couple of years ago, I came across a Danish person in Oxford who was writing his PhD thesis using Markdown. And I looked into what he was doing, and one of the things he did was he implemented a track changes for the output. And he used Lua to do that, but he used Lua as an internal filter within the R Markdown workflow. So what's happening a lot now, or what used to happen a long time ago, is that people would use LaTeX to write their manuals for things like CVS, and print manuals were the way to go, and they have their benefits. What's happening a lot now is that technical documentation for software is being written in Markdown and published on Read the Docs, and sometimes you get PDF out of it and sometimes you don't. I think usually you don't. The Python people use something called restructured text, which is designed specifically for technical documentation of Python code. Has a lot of features for that purpose, and that does produce PDF outputs. So in terms of technical documentation, things have moved on a lot in the last 20 years or so, and those systems that produce dual outputs have a specific markup language in the front, and usually I think it's a bit custom. So there are people that are using LaTeX as a back-end system and not seeing it as a front-end system, although if they're using mathematics, they will encounter LaTeX mathematics, because that's the usual way to put mathematics in these systems.